Luke Skywalker is the OG Star Wars character. He's the character that we as an audience followed from day one, and after more than 42 years, his story is finally complete with the conclusion of the Skywalker saga. So now it's time to put his life together, going through the films, the comics, the novels, and anything else he appears in, and I'm going to explain Luke's entire life story. Now, this is the Disney canon, not Legends canon, so I won't be covering anything made before Disney bought Lucasfilm. Now, there are major spoilers in this video for all Star Wars media, but especially the rise of Skywalker, so you've been warned. Before we start, I make new videos every week, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on to make sure you never miss a Movie Flame video. Now, let's get started. Luke, along with his twin sister Leia, were born to Anakin Skywalker and his wife Padme Amidala. After their birth, however, he and Leia were split up due to the fact that their father turned to the dark side and helped rule the Empire, unaware that he had children, and his mother died of a broken heart while giving birth. Luke was taken by Obi-Wan, or Ben Kenobi, to the planet Tatooine, where his only family resided, his Uncle Owen and his Aunt Beru, though they were really his step-aunt and uncle as he wasn't blood related. This was done to protect Luke from his father and the Emperor. During Luke's childhood, his uncle unsuccessfully tried to discourage his adventurous tendencies, and Luke was told that his father had been a navigator on a spice freighter during the Clone Wars. Aunt Beru went against Uncle Owen, however, and she tried to show Luke the larger world outside of Tatooine by reading him storybooks, and one day even taking him to Anchorhead to show him images of forests, rivers, and oceans through the HoloNet. Unknown to a very young Luke, his favorite model spaceships were built and were sneakily placed where he could find them by Ben Kenobi, who still resided in Tatooine to make sure Luke was safe. Luke, however, came to Ben's rescue one day when he was outnumbered in a fight, and Luke threw the model spaceship to distract Ben's attacker, and together, Luke, Ben, and his Uncle Owen took them down. Luke then watched his Uncle Owen punch Ben and knock him to the ground, and he ushered Luke away. Owen told Ben that Luke showing a bravery had potential ramifications for the future he and his wife had set for him. They needn't worry, however, as Luke had been so young here that he did not remember Ben Kenobi or this incident. When Luke was 8, he ran away from home to confront Jabba's thugs who had been taking advantage of moisture farmers taking a water tax, and when Luke came face to face with them, he told them that he wasn't scared. A hooded Ben Kenobi then came to ensure that Luke didn't get hurt, but in the chaos, Luke was knocked out, and after finishing the thugs off, Ben took Luke home to his aunt and uncle, and Luke never knew the identity of his rescuer. When Luke and his uncle got into a fight, Luke ran away from home and planned to go to Mos Eisley, but as he was walking, he sensed through the force that his uncle was in trouble and he sprinted back. When he got there, he learned that his uncle had been kidnapped by a Wookiee bounty hunter. Luke fixed the disabled Skyhopper and flew toward his uncle. While flying, he saw an old man that he did not recognize, Ben Kenobi, and Ben just barely missing catching his Uncle Owen as he fell off a cliff. In the Skyhopper, Luke flew down just in time to save his uncle. When he landed, the two embraced and they apologized to each other. Luke continued to fly a Skyhopper, and over the years, he became an incredible pilot, and rightly so because it was in his blood. Eventually, Luke became an adventure-seeking youth who demonstrated his father's natural piloting skills, as well as a strong desire to leave Tatooine. On one of his rebellious days, Luke and his friend Wendy went off on their own into the Tatooine desert, and while there, they encountered a sandstorm which made both become unconscious. When Luke awoke, he was face to face with a dangerous creature, but Ben Kenobi came just in time to save his life. Luke, still unaware of who Ben Kenobi was, asked him his name, and Ben told him, saying that he was an old friend of his father's. Luke and Wendy then made it back safely to the moisture farms. As more of Luke's friends left the planet to follow their dreams, he became increasingly frustrated with his uncle, who would not allow him to do the same, as he claimed he needed help on the farm, but in reality, Owen was trying to ensure that Luke did not follow in his father's footsteps. Luke applied to the Imperial Academy, but he had to cancel his application when his uncle once again said he needed him. Luke saw a battle above Tatooine, and was so excited he went to show his friends, and while there, he was very excited to see his friend Biggs back. All of Luke's friends dismissed this, however, and told him that the rebellion was a long way away. He then caught up with Biggs, and Biggs admitted that he was part of the rebellion.
The rebellion?
Making Luke longingly wish he could leave Tatooine too. Luke then said goodbye to Biggs for what he thought was the last time. Luke's life changed, however, when two droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO, arrived on Tatooine from the fight that Luke had seen earlier, and his uncle bought both of these droids. Luke found a message from a beautiful girl, who at the time he did not know was his sister, and she said that she needed Obi-Wan Kenobi's help, and just recently finding out who Ben Kenobi was, he wondered if that was who she was after. While having dinner with his aunt and uncle, he and his Uncle Owen got into another fight, and Luke left the table to watch the sunset, desperately wishing that he could get off this planet. When Luke returned to the droids, he found out that R2-D2 had left. He and C-3PO went to find R2 the following day, and when they were met by Sand People, Ben Kenobi saved them. When they went back to Ben's hut, Ben heard the message and told Luke about his past and his father's real past and how he actually fought in the Clone Wars as a Jedi. Ben then presented Luke with his father's lightsaber and introduced Luke to the Force.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
Ben then asked Luke to accompany him on a mission to save this beautiful princess on the planet Alderaan. Luke, however, said that he couldn't, but after finding his aunt and uncle dead at his home, a devastated Luke decided to accompany Ben to Alderaan. And to get there, they hired pilots Han Solo and Chewbacca, and they flew on the Millennium Falcon. While on the ship, Ben introduced Luke to Jedi training tools, and Luke was able to use the Force to block its blasts, even with his eyes covered, and it was the first time that he knowingly used the Force.
You know, I did feel something. I could almost see the remote.
That's good. You've taken your first step into a larger world.
When they got to Alderaan, they were shocked to find out that the planet had been destroyed, and they were then pulled into the biggest and most powerful space station ever made, called the Death Star. There they found out that the princess was on board, and Luke, Han, and Chewbacca all went to save her, while Ben disabled the tractor beam to ensure they could escape. They all learned to work together, and they eventually made it back to the Millennium Falcon, but as they made their way to the ship, Luke saw Ben give his life willingly, and Luke, frozen by shock, then heard Ben's voice telling him to run.
Run, Luke, run!
Luke, Han, Leia, and Chewbacca once again worked together to hold a few TIE ships off, and they then made their way to a rebel base called Yavin 4. There they planned their assault to destroy the Death Star, but Luke was disappointed when Han left, not wanting to be a part of this fight. Before taking off, Luke was reunited with his friend Biggs from Tatooine.
Hey Biggs, I told you I'd make it someday.
During the assault, Luke had to step up and became one of the leading members, and it ultimately came down to him, but Darth Vader was on Luke's tail, making it very difficult. To Luke's relief and excitement, however, Han and Chewbacca returned, shooting Vader out of the way and allowing Luke to take a shot. As he turned his targeting computer on, however, he once again heard Ben's voice, this time telling him to use the Force instead, and Luke did just that. He hit his tiny target straight on, and the Death Star was no more. The rebellion had won this battle. Luke along with Han got medals for their heroics, and the friends standing up on stage were now a team. After Luke's success in destroying the Death Star, and after proving himself a few more times afterwards, he became an officer in the Alliance and was given the rank of lieutenant, and after this, he was assigned to numerous independent missions. On one mission, he, R2, and a pilot named Nakari flew a ship to the planet Rhodia. There, Luke met a female Rhodian named Tanich Sunta, who told Luke that during the Clone Wars, his father Anakin saved her uncle named Hulick, who was also a Jedi. While going to Hulick's tomb, they were attacked by a creature on the planet, and Sunta gave Luke her uncle's lightsaber to kill it. Luke later tried to focus on analyzing Hulick's lightsaber, and tried to learn telekinesis, the power to use the Force to move objects, but a planet-wide alert forced him to leave Rhodia immediately and meet up with Akbar and Leia. The two sent Luke and Nakari on a different mission, and Leia warned Luke not to trust Nakari. Luke, however, did not listen to his sister, and he actually grew to care for and develop feelings for Nakari. This made it all the more tragic when she was killed by a bounty hunter after them, and Luke was devastated. After completing the mission, Luke returned Nakari's body to her father, and after reflecting, he realized that he had learned telekinesis thanks to her support. Luke went on another mission with 3PO and R2, and they ended up on Davaran after Luke let the Force guide him to the Temple of Edid. When they landed, Luke met Farnay and also Sarko Plank, both of whom wanted to take him to the temple, but Plank was more convincing. However, Farnay was untrusting of Plank, so she followed them. When they got to the temple, Plank did not accompany him as Luke went in. While in the temple, Luke heard Ben Kenobi's voice, who gave him further instructions. He managed to enter a secret chamber where he found 3 training remotes, similar to what Ben had showed him on the Millennium Falcon. After a few days, he gradually managed to pass the exercises, but then he found himself surrounded by Imperials with orders to apprehend him, and they were using Farnay as a hostage. Luckily, Plank arrived and helped Luke fight the stormtroopers off. However, Plank was not in there for heroics. He was in there to ransack the temple to pay his debts, and he challenged Luke to a duel. After fighting dirty, Plank was eventually beaten by Luke. The combination of the intense training and all of the fighting exhausted Luke so much that he passed out, and Farnay tended to his wounds. Luke later told her that he would become a Jedi and would rebuild the Order, and one day would return here. Luke, along with 3PO and R2, then escaped the temple as Imperial reinforcements arrived. Luke did not only do solo missions, but went on missions with his rebel team as well, and on one mission, he came face to face with Vader. He heard Ben's voice tell him to run, but Luke did not listen. During their fight, Vader taunted Luke and said that he wasn't a true Jedi. As Luke fought back, he was almost killed by Vader, but he was saved by his friends in an AT-AT who came just in time. Luke then escaped and finished the whole point of the mission by blowing the place up on his speeder bike, and then made it back to the Falcon to rejoin the others. Vader's words about him not being a true Jedi really got to Luke, and he told the others that he had to figure out who he was before he could go on any more missions. He went back to his home planet Tatooine, and there, he went to Ben Kenobi's hut. He found a box addressed to Skywalker, but before he could open it, he was attacked by Boba Fett. With the help of R2, they beat him, and Luke flew off the planet with the box, and inside, he found journals written by Ben, and learned that Ben had been watching over him his whole life on Tatooine. Luke became frustrated with the journals, however, because they did not teach him anything or help him learn how to become a Jedi. Instead, he planned to go to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, but first he went to the Smuggler's Moon to find someone to help him do this. While there, however, he met nothing but trouble, eventually getting knocked out because he had claimed that his father was a Jedi. When he awoke, Gracchus the Hutt tested Luke with the Jedi holocron, and as Luke reached out with the Force, he was able to open that holocron and many others in the room, and through one of them, it was revealed to Luke that there was a Jedi temple on Vrogus Voss. After escaping from Gracchus, Luke went to Vrogus Voss to check this temple out, but when he and the rebels got there, Vader arrived and took down a huge amount of rebel ships, and to put a stop to it, Luke, who had sensed it was Vader, crashed into a ship, damaging both of their vessels, and they both crash landed on Vrogus Voss. Luke ended up crashing outside the ruins of the Jedi Temple, and when he went in, Ben spoke out to him saying that he should not have come here, and that he was not ready for what was coming. He was then met by one of Vader's greatest enemies, Commander Carbon's men, and he was taken prisoner on their ship. But Vader, not wanting his enemy Carbon to succeed, brought his ship down with the Force, allowing Luke to escape and reunite with his friends. As they left, however, Luke was disappointed that he would never learn the secrets inside of the temple, knowing that he could never go back. On one mission, Luke came face to face with Sergeant Creel, a stormtrooper from the 501st who was after him specifically, and who wielded a lightsaber. He fought Luke, and though he was evenly matched, Luke used his Force ability against him and shot him flying back. Luke then escaped and had the chance to go after Vader's ship, but instead, he decided to escape with the rest of the rebels. Luke came face to face with Sergeant Creel again many months later. Before the fight, a girl that Luke had grown close to, Tula Marcona, grabbed him and kissed him, but what she was really doing was giving Luke a smoke grenade. He and Creel then engaged, and while fighting, he was surrounded. To get away, he threw a smoke grenade which distracted everybody and he ran. Luke faced Sergeant Creel one more time when Creel and his team engaged rebel forces, and the rebel forces fought back and defeated Creel and his men. Luke once again fought one-on-one against Creel, and Luke destroyed his lightsaber. Seeing that they had lost, Creel and his men fled. A little while later, when the Empire sent out many probes to find Rebel Alliance bases, Luke took it upon himself to help clear them out and make sure each base did not get caught. While doing this on one planet, the planet began to be destroyed, and Luke came face to face with Vader. He narrowly avoided him and got off the planet before it blew up. The past 3 years since destroying the Death Star took Luke on many missions and to many places, and he finally ended up on a rebel base on the planet Hoth. While there, he was left out in the snow overnight, and he narrowly escaped being mauled when he used the Force to call his lightsaber to him. While stranded in the storm, Luke saw Ben Kenobi's Force Ghost come to him, telling him to find Yoda on the planet Dagobah to learn the ways of the Force. Luke was found by Han, who ensured he didn't die overnight, and the two of them were rescued the next morning. The base eventually came under attack by the Empire, and a huge battle commenced where Luke showed his true power, taking a walker down single-handedly with no ship. However, they lost the battle and had to flee the rebel base. Luke separated from his friends and found Yoda on Dagobah, and there, Yoda trained him in the ways of the Force, making his connection with the Force much stronger than it had been. However, Luke also failed a few tests, like when he went into a cave that was strong with the dark side and gave into his inner darkness. While training, Luke saw his friends in trouble through the Force, and despite Yoda and Ben begging him to stay, Luke left, though he promised that he would return to finish his training. When he went to Cloud City to save his friends, it turned out to be a trap, and Luke was forced to face Vader. Vader tried to freeze Luke in a carbon freezing chamber, but Luke turned out to be more elusive than Vader thought. At the end of the fight, Vader cut Luke's hand off, but this pain was nothing to the pain he felt when Vader told him that he was his father. Vader said that if he joined him, they could rule the galaxy as father and son and overthrow the Emperor, but Luke did not even give this a second thought. Refusing to join Vader, Luke opted to let himself fall instead, and he was taken to the bottom of Cloud City. He reached out with the Force, and Leia sensed him and turned back to rescue him. After being saved, Vader reached out to Luke through the Force, calling him his son, and during this, Luke came to the realization that Vader really was his father. After rejoining the Rebel fleet, Luke had his hand fixed, and it was now replaced with a robotic hand. Luke went off on his own, and after losing his lightsaber in the battle against Vader, he constructed a new lightsaber, though he was missing some pieces, so it wasn't perfect, but it got the job done. He also trained by himself using the Force a great deal, making him far more powerful, and able to do things like the Force choke. He used his new lightsaber as well as his Force abilities to help in a raid of an Imperial refining platform, and all of the rebels that he led were awed by his ability. As Luke and his strike team flew away from the platform, they were ambushed by an Imperial Star Destroyer. As the battle began to rage, Luke's mind was penetrated by a vision from the Emperor. The vision saw Luke follow a possible series of events where he left the Rebel strike team and crash land on an unknown planet. As he walked away, he dropped his lightsaber and helmet on the ground, symbolizing his complete retreat from the concerns of the war. Having this vision actually helped Luke, however, as it allowed him to know how to aid the rebels in escaping the ambush. After learning of Han's fate, being frozen and being taken away by Boba Fett, Luke went to Kothlis, and there he learned Han's location in Jabba the Hutt's palace and devised a plan to save him. He returned to Tatooine once again, and he went to Ben's hut. There he found the missing parts he needed to perfect his new lightsaber, parts that Ben had left for him. His friends followed through with the plan, all going to see Jabba, and Luke retreated into the solitude of the desert cave. There he used the Force to assemble his lightsaber correctly, putting the Kyber crystal inside, making the weapon his own, now an extension of himself. When Luke went to Jabba's, he was strict and had to face a Rancor, and though he succeeded, he, Han, and Chewie were to walk off the plank. But R2 came through and gave Luke his lightsaber, and he and his friends fought back, Luke showing everyone just how skillful he had become. After escaping and blowing up the Hutt ship, Luke separated from his friends once again, and just as he had promised, he returned to Dagobah to complete his training. There, Yoda gave him confirmation that Vader was his father, and that the only way to become a Jedi was to defeat him. After Yoda passed away, Luke then talked to Ben's Force Ghost, and he learned some other huge news that Leia was his sister. Ben then told Luke that Vader was too far gone, but Luke said that there was still good in him. Luke returned to the rebellion and went with his friends to Endor. While there, however, Luke knew that he had to confront his father. Before leaving, he told Leia that she was his sister, and told her that he had to help turn their father to the light.
There is good in him. I felt it. He won't turn me over to the Emperor. I can save him. I can turn him back to the good side.
When he turned himself in, he had a chat with Vader, and though his speech did not work, it planted the seed in Vader's head that maybe there was good in him. Vader then brought Luke to the Emperor, and the Emperor tried to turn Luke to the dark side, telling him to kill his father and take his place. Luke had a moment of weakness where he gave in to the dark side, but afterwards, Luke refused to turn.
I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
In punishment, the Emperor shot Luke with Force lightning, and Luke cried out for his father's help. With Luke's influence and the thought that he would lose his only son, Vader picked Palpatine up and threw him down the shaft. Vader then asked Luke to take his helmet off so he could look at Luke with his own eyes. Luke obeyed, and Vader, who was once again Anakin, told Luke that he was right about him, and moments later, he died. Back on Endor, Luke cremated his father's armor out of respect, and then joined his friends in celebration. Luke saw Ben, Yoda, and his father's Force Ghost looking at him with a sense of peace and approval. In the battle's aftermath, Luke reported to the Rebel Alliance that the Emperor and Darth Vader were dead, and the Alliance used their deaths to push forward messages of hope and that a new era was beginning. They then began the formation of the New Republic, a successor to the state of the Galactic Republic. Right after the Battle of Endor, Luke kept his promise and returned to Fornay's planet just as he said he would when he became a Jedi and started to rebuild the New Order. Luke went on a mission to retrieve the last remaining fragments of a Force-sensitive tree, which once dwelled in the heart of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, and Shara Bey went with him. The two worked well together, and were successful in getting the tree. All that was left, however, were 2 twigs, and Luke kept one and gave the other to Bey. Bey told Luke that she was considering leaving the Alliance to reunite with her husband Kes Dameron, and their son, Poe Dameron. She was unsure, however, but Luke convinced her to leave and go home to her family. Luke began to train his sister Leia in the ways of the Force and lightsaber combat, but she opted to stop her training after seeing that her Jedi path would lead to the death of her unborn son. However, she said that her lightsaber would be picked up again by someone who would finish her journey. Leia and Han eventually did have a son, and they named him Ben Solo, and Luke became an uncle. Luke disappeared for a while when he went on an untold mission, and on the mission, he recovered the original Jedi texts from some ruins, and later found many more. One day, Luke sensed a great disturbance in the Force, a familiar presence, Darth Sidious, aka the Emperor. He began investigating this disturbance and began tracking a Sith cultist assassin named Achi. With the help of Lando, they tracked Achi to a planet where they found a ship, but Achi was nowhere to be found, and the trail went cold. Luke continued to seek out Jedi lore, scouring worlds for the remaining Jedi texts, hoping to find information that the Empire tried to erase. He was aided by Lord Santeca, who was old enough to remember the Jedi Knights before the Clone Wars, and he told Luke that he did not believe the Emperor's lies about how the Jedi betrayed the Republic. He also told Luke that he believed the return of the Jedi Order was essential to bring balance to the Force. During his quest to learn as much as he could about the Jedi as possible, Luke learned about some of the Jedi Masters that existed before the fall of the Order, such as Mace Windu and Qui-Gon Jinn, and he also learned about midi-chlorians, the Jedi Code, and about the different Jedi temples that existed, such as the Lothal Jedi Temple, and he even managed to find a page of Caleb Doom, aka Kanan Jarrus' journal. Luke began training his nephew Ben in the ways of the Force, and he was impressed with Ben's raw power. Eventually, Luke set out to begin training a whole new generation of Jedi past just his nephew, and he had great hope for the future of the Jedi, and he based his new Jedi Order at a secret Jedi temple, which only those in the Order knew about. During this time, however, Snoke, who was secretly a puppet of Emperor Palpatine, began influencing Ben from afar, clouding him with the dark side, and at the same time, Palpatine began speaking to Ben through the Force using the voice of Darth Vader, Ben's grandfather, and he had the voice of Vader try to turn Ben to the dark side and shatter Luke's resolve to restore the Jedi. Luke, who sensed the darkness within his nephew growing, decided to take Ben out as he lay asleep. Seeing that Snoke had overthrown his apprentice's heart with the dark side, Luke sensed that Ben would bring nothing but death and destruction if he did not act, and for a brief moment, he raised his lightsaber to destroy him, believing that it was the only way. This instinct was gone almost the second it had come, however, and Luke was immediately filled with shame. Ben had woken up to see his uncle standing over him with his lightsaber raised, and he reacted by pulling his own lightsaber to him in self-defense and attacked his uncle. Luke was knocked out, and when he awoke, he found the temple destroyed, his other students either dead or had followed Ben. Luke was essentially the last Jedi now, as his nephew had joined Snoke and had taken on the name Kylo Ren, and he became a leader of the dark side group known as the Knights of Ren. Luke was deeply affected by this, feeling that he had failed his nephew, his sister, Han, his students, the Jedi legacy, and even himself. He went into a self-imposed exile, vanishing from the galaxy without a trace. He had gone to Ahch-To, the birthplace of the Jedi Order, and an almost untraceable planet. He planned to live the rest of his days there in exile, and he shut himself off from the Force, and in doing so, the spirits of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin were no longer able to guide him or talk sense into him. Though absent from galactic affairs, Luke's story was nonetheless a thing of myth and legend in certain corners of the galaxy, and this was made sure of even more when the First Order pushed this idea, and he became more mythic rather than historic. Leia searched for her brother for years, but to no avail, but his location was finally found when the Resistance got the last piece of a map that was in BB-8. Shortly after this, Rey along with Chewbacca arrived on the island on Ahch-To in the Millennium Falcon, and Rey presented Luke with his old lightsaber, but when she gave it to him, he threw it away. He told her that he was not going to help her or the Resistance, and told her to leave. Chewbacca then kicked his door in, and Luke was surprised but excited to see his old friend again, but this excitement did not last, as he found out about the death of Han, and more importantly, how it happened, now blaming himself even more. That night, Luke went to the Millennium Falcon, and while on board, R2 showed him the message that started his journey all those years ago.
That was a cheap move.
This inspired Luke to give Rey a chance, but when he saw that her power was identical to his nephew's, he freaked out and abandoned the lesson. Luke had sensed something else, however, that Rey was the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine himself, and despite Rey wishing to know who she was, Luke kept this to himself. The last straw, however, was when he found Rey and his nephew talking through a force bond, and when they touched hands, Luke blew the roof off the hut and ordered Rey to leave, but Rey then disarmed him, and Luke revealed the truth about what happened with his nephew the night he left. After finding this out, Rey decided to leave, After Rey left, Luke was visited by Yoda's spirit, who he had not seen for decades, and Yoda told him that failure is the greatest teacher, words that stuck with Luke, realizing that he was stupid for running away and hiding from his failures instead of facing them. This made Luke use the Force to see his sister for one last time, and to finally face his nephew, who in his eyes was the biggest failure of his life. His nephew faced him and tried to fight him, but Luke simply danced around him without engaging him in any form of a counterattack. When his nephew stopped trying to go after him, Luke apologized to Ben, saying that he had failed him. He then told his nephew that victory was not as certain as he believed, and that he was not the last Jedi, referring to Rey, who he had just sensed had used the Force to free the Resistance so they could escape. Luke then let his nephew try to strike him down, but his lightsaber went right through him, and Ben realized that Luke was never there, but still on Ahch-To. Back on Ahch-To, Luke collapsed from the mental stress necessary to sustain such a lifelike illusion, and as he sat down on the cliff, overlooking the twin suns, just as he had done so many times back on Tatooine, he heard Obi-Wan's voice urging him to let go, and so he did. Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master, Ace Pilot, Galactic Legend, and son of the Chosen One, passed away, joining his father and many other old masters as he became one with the Force, finally feeling peace and purpose. Luke's final living thoughts were that his adventure on the realm of the living had ended in the same way it began, by the light of the two suns. 1 year after becoming one with the Force, Luke sensed that Leia had passed on, becoming one with the Force as well. Shortly afterwards, he sensed that Rey had discovered the truth behind her father, and had stranded herself on Ahch-To just as he had done. As she threw her lightsaber into the wreckage of her ship, Luke appeared and grabbed it out of the air. Luke told Rey that her legacy would not be defined by her bloodline, but by her heart and her actions. Luke then gave Rey Leia's lightsaber, fulfilling what his sister had once said to him, that someone would pick up her saber and finish her journey. Luke was among numerous Jedi to reach out to Rey during her final fight, saying that the Force would be with her, and this gave Rey the inner strength to overcome the Emperor and finally destroy him once and for all. After the fight was won, Rey went to Luke's hut on Tatooine, and he along with his sister watched Rey bury both of their lightsabers, and they both smiled proudly at her. Luke was one of the most influential people in the Star Wars universe. He achieved so much, becoming a Jedi, redeeming his father and his family name, helped defeat the Emperor twice, and finally became one with the Force, joining so many other incredible Jedi we've seen throughout the vast Star Wars universe. Luke will always be remembered as a hero of mythic proportions, and one of the greatest Jedi to ever live. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life and see more of this little dude. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook for Movie Flame updates. And I want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed below. If you want to be featured in the next video, plus get a bunch of other rewards, become a patron today. Again, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you press that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great videos on the way.